Hey, everybody, this is Dan with Pain Free You. And today I'm on the line with John. And John is one of the people who has a great success story to share. And John, I don't even know where you live. Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Wyoming.
Wow, cool.
Spent, yeah, spent my entire adult life up until 2 years ago in Portland, Oregon. And
Nice.
then 2 years ago, I relocated to Central Texas, Austin
Nice.
specifically, to live closer to family, mainly my parents, who fortunately are still alive, that live in the Houston area. So technically, I'm a Texas resident, but for the last year, I've been camping full time, or overlanding, as they
Oh,
say.
wow.
And so I've been on the road. And right now, I'm in the Park City, Utah area.
Wow, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, my son, not for a year. He did a month-long road trip and he camped and he saw like 26 national parks inside of a month.
that's
He
great.
borrowed my mom's and his meaning his grandmother's Prius, and in a 30-day period put about 11,000 miles on it.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. If you have the opportunity to do it, and certainly last year being like it was, being out on the road and getting out in nature has certainly helped my overall well being.
Very cool, man. So why don't you share a little bit with the audience here as to a little bit of your journey with chronic pain? Like, when did you first kind of get hit with it? What was your journey with the mainstream medicine world? When did you kind of figure out who this Dr. Sarno mind body TMS guy was? How did that journey go? And, you know, kind of see if you can lead into a little bit kind of what turned things for you and helped you kind of break through. Because, a little bit of where you were physically, symptom wise, mentally, and where you are now, which sounds like you're traveling the darn country,
Yeah.
living
Yeah.
living out of tents or campers, something like
Yep.
that. So
Sure.
take it away.
Well, I'll try to be real linear in terms of my progression, because I think that might be helpful for people. At least it was for me when I listened to others' journey over the last several years. My introduction, so to speak, with what I'll call the TMS paradigm, that's just the way I phrase it.
Accurate.
I can pinpoint mine down to within the week. It was the second week of March 2015. Prior to that, I was otherwise a physically very healthy, no health issues, nothing musculoskeletal, nothing autoimmune. I just was a healthy person, had never had a serious illness or injury in my life.
Cool.
I think that's important to say, because the morning that I woke up in March of 2015, I went to bed feeling physically 100%, although I was dealing with some things, which I'll go into,
Mhm.
to waking up feeling metaphorically as though I had just been in an automobile accident and had sustained some upper body, shoulder, neck, head, and face trauma.
Wow.
And that might sound extreme, but that's what it felt like. And so I knew intuitively, well, I hadn't fallen out of bed. I hadn't been beaten with a baseball bat by an intruder.
Sure.
And I have a bachelor's degree, a Bachelor of Science degree in exercise physiology. I only say that to let you know I have an understanding of the human body, physiology, and I have a good sense of my health and wellness and fitness, that I'm like, something doesn't make sense.
Sure.
But anyway, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. So before I get into, okay, now I'm hurting, what was your hurting or not feeling good? What was that? What were the symptoms? Before I get to that, let me say, okay, what led up to that
Sure.
infamous morning? In 2009, I guess I probably really set things into motion. And maybe I was, as the people in the community refer to, TMSers. I may have been hardwired for TMS my whole life and not known it, looking back on my childhood and some of the things I dealt with physically. But in 2009, I'd gone through some life changes. I had to shut down a business out kind of '08 when the economy went sideways. I had owned a commercial coffee roasting company in Oregon for a number of years. It was large enough scale that my investors and I had agreed we needed to sell it, and it wasn't financially viable. And I had shut down that business, let go of a number of staff. It was very stressful. I'd had a serious relationship end at the same time, and I was under a lot of financial pressure.
Okay.
And I was in at that time I was 39 years old, and then for the next from 39 to mid 40s, next 5-6 years, it was trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life now, recovering from financial issues, a lot of self-loathing because of the what I deemed failed business, failed adult relationship, a lot of personal issues that I think most adults deal with. Never having it occur to me that I was setting myself up for what led to 2015.
Well, yeah, and let's make it very clear that this is nothing you set yourself up for. This isn't anything you did wrong. It's just where you ended up.
Right, exactly. And I had no idea what was in store for me. So I'm doing my best to cope with what life throws at you as an adult, the best I knew how with the support system that I had at that time. And, but I think the takeaway is I had a good from '09 to 2015, however many years that is, of being in what I felt was a pressure cooker of stress and anxiety that I hadn't experienced before up to that point. So for me, January 29th of 2015, month and a half before my symptoms had kicked in with TMS, my best friend of 37 years, a guy that I had gone from kindergarten, literally, we were in kindergarten together, through graduating high school. We were locker partners in high school. We played football together. He was my very best friend, a brother from another mother, had left this world via suicide.
Wow.
So, and I hadn't seen him, which sounds crazy, is him being my oldest best friend. I hadn't seen him for 15 years either.
Wow.
Prior to that, nothing wrong with our relationship, but it just the way life had happened. And he was married at the time, had a child. He still lived in the Mountain West in Wyoming. I was up in Oregon, and you know how life goes. You don't see people. So the day I found out about it, it was the most unexpected thing I could ever imagine. Now, I had lost family members and friends through more, if you want to call it natural causes, illnesses, those types of things. But having not been anybody intimately related to somebody who has either died from suicide or homicide, this is just my personal feeling on the matter. And I believe that when you lose somebody close to you in either of those manners, I think it's unique. Not saying it's harder, but it's just different.
Because it's completely out of left field. It's a complete shock. Somebody's sick, they eventually die. You've got a little lead into it. You can prepare for it.
Yeah.
It is out of the blue. So I can't even imagine.
Yeah. So when I got the news, I think for probably 72 hours, I was probably in shock, but I wasn't I hadn't broken down. I hadn't cried. I just was I didn't feel anything. I was just in awe.
Numb.
And I'd reached out to his parents, who I hadn't talked to in many years as well. And I had been very close. They were like my second parents growing up.
Right.
Got all the particulars. And for me, that's, in my mind, and I use it metaphorically, it's as though somebody turned over the hourglass or triggered the dominoes that said, okay, we've set into motion a set of experiences that you have never heard of or couldn't conceive would exist. This was just the way my mind was operating, which was TMS. Because about 4 or 5 weeks later, a month and a half later, obviously my feelings towards my friend dying were getting worse, and it was multiplying the effects of everything else I was dealing with. Sure. I was at that point, I had my personal possessions in storage. I was living with an old college buddy of mine in a spare bedroom, trying to pull my life back together. When in my mind, I felt it should have been together. I'm 45, college educated, had all the advantages. And I was falling apart, and I didn't recognize how badly it was. And then when I woke up that morning in March, the symptoms, I rolled out of bed. I thought my jaw was broken. I had extreme pain, inflammation, and joint pain in my neck and in my jaw. My left ear felt fully clogged, like it was clogged with wax, plus tinnitus or ear ringing.
Sure.
I had deep burning sinus pain in my left nostril, as though somebody had taken a swab and jammed it all the way up there. And I had blurred vision in my left eye. Wow. I have a pretty high pain threshold, but I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I was at an 8, like at a level of trauma, like I'd just been through an accident. I need to go to the emergency room. And it almost seems unbelievable that I could have gone to bed feeling fine and then to wake up to that, but that was what happened. Wow. And I went through a day or two of that feeling, talking to my buddy, my roommate, saying, I don't know what's going on with me, just trying to figure it out myself, till I finally thought, okay, I need to go in to see my primary care doc and find out what's going on. And this was my first step into dealing with the medical community on what was happening. So I think anybody listening to this or watching this can imagine how that conversation went. And I'm sitting there, my doctor came in, the nurse came in, told them my symptoms. They did all the vitals, everything. They'd asked me what was going on. And it all welled up in me. I ended up breaking down, so much so that I ended up on the floor, hyperventilating. The nurse and the doctor consoling me, making sure I can breathe. All of that from the day I found out my buddy died in January had let loose. And the doctor, in this particular case, wasn't too far off base. He said, "Hey, John," he goes, "this is clearly emotional because you didn't have any issues. You didn't have
no trauma, no physical trauma."
Right. He goes, "This is clearly emotional. And I believe once you get a handle on that, this is going to subside." But just that was the extent of it. I don't think this is an assumption. I'm sure that doctor had never even heard of TMS. Sure. But this is the part where all of a sudden you know where this goes. Let me prescribe an antidepressant. Let me describe Xanax. And because by the time I got in there, I had so much nerve pain in this upper area. Let me put you on, I believe it was gabapentin. Sure. And it was, so I was on, I believe, Zoloft, Xanax, and gabapentin, just like that. And was told, "Hey man, lean on your family and friends during this time. This stuff will take the edge off until you get perspective and get your footing, and it should self-correct." Okay. And that was it. So I spent probably 3 weeks on that protocol. And for me, now this could have been imagined, I don't know. Right. For me, by the end of those 3 weeks, I felt like the medication was morphing my symptoms into, the symptoms were still intense. They hadn't shifted yet. It was still that list of symptoms I outlined. But now I had this despair that hit me that was more ominous than any I'd ever dealt with. Now, I had a history in my adult life of, I never wanted to call it depression, but it certainly was. And I had had a history leading up to that of suicidal ideation prior to that friend of mine committing suicide, or what however you want to call that. I was aware of that, but I hadn't felt a real heavy presence of those symptoms prior to that. And while I was on these medications and during that time, there was definitely a shift in that 3 weeks of time. I called my doctor and said, hey, I feel like this medication is making me feel worse. I'm going off. And of course, he was adamantly opposed to that in a polite, professional manner, but told me his reasons why he thought it was inappropriate. But I said, I'm not going to argue with you. How do I
get off safely?
Yeah. Get off safely? And he told me what to do. And I made that decision. I went in to see him one other time after that. I promised to come in and see him a couple weeks after I'd been off, and told him I was adamant about staying off that. But I did ask him, I'm like, I'm not convinced that this is emotional, because now this jaw pain was in my molars, my lower molars, where I was convinced I had a jawbone infection. And so he suggested I go see my dentist. And I had asked him, I wanted to understand what was going on with me. And he said to me, and I'll never forget it, John, it really doesn't matter what the root cause of this is. Our objective as doctors is to treat your symptoms so you don't suffer and so you can get better. And that was just orthogonal to my belief system. So I just kind of felt like we're never going to be on the same page.
And that's the problem with the mainstream world is we treat symptoms. We don't worry about what causes it. We just treat symptoms, which as long as you're doing that.
Yeah. And he certainly gave me. The likelihood
of success is really small.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and it wasn't, and I get it. He's not a counselor, a licensed clinical social worker, a psychiatrist. So he never even made an effort to say, hey, ask any type of penetrating questions about what was going on, other than this is obvious that there's emotional trauma. You need to get it dealt with. The only part I'm going to play in this is giving you meds to deal with symptoms. Yeah. And so from there, I quickly, over the next 2 weeks, I should say frantically, and I'm sure a lot of people who are new to dealing with this can understand, I was in such a high level. My level of 8 now was at a 10, right, to where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to survive this, because I thought my body was shutting down. It's either that or I'm going to take my own life, because I'm suffering at a degree I can't deal with this. Sure. I went to my dentist, told them all my symptoms in my jaw. They took full sets of x-rays, no fractures, no cavities, no root canals needed. I didn't accept that diagnosis. And then I went to see an oral surgeon who basically said, I don't know why you're here, but I think to appease me, more x-rays. And the consensus was, there's nothing wrong with your jaw, any of the hardware, any of the teeth.
Well, yeah.
Right. So I didn't get into what had happened with me emotionally with them, just the symptoms, because I didn't want to cloud their diagnosis. But it was basically, you've got all this hardware pain, but there's nothing broken. Right. So now I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. I then suffered in silence, so to speak, for another couple of weeks, started talking with family and friends about planning my exit permanently.
Oh, wow.
That's how bad it had gotten. Mm-hmm. And went and did the thing that everybody does. I went down a obsessive compulsive Google search rabbit hole. Right. Now, look, I'm not necessarily a proponent of that, but it's hard for me to knock it too much, because had I not done that, I would have never discovered which is the next step of my story, Dr. Sarno.
Sure.
I was convinced after a few weeks from seeing the oral surgeon that I had made a self-diagnosis that I had an extreme form of fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia ticked off all the boxes. And I'm like, okay. And of course, it's perfect because nobody knows what causes it. There's no known cure for fibromyalgia. So I thought I had a death sentence. Well, this is what I was telling myself.
Keep in mind, though, as you know now, fibromyalgia is TMS.
And which is, yeah, exactly. Which I was going to get to.
I know. Jumping ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said it, Dan, because it's so important. When I came across Dr. Sarno's name, here's the irony in it, and you can take this however you want. I had said at the beginning of this conversation, I have a degree in exercise science. I worked in the fitness industry for nearly 25 years in my first career. A portion of that time, I worked as a consultant and educator with a corporate fitness organization based in Portland that essentially works with large corporations and usually the head of safety for large companies to deal with work hardening programs, on the job injuries, joint injury prevention awareness, et cetera. So we dealt with a lot of industrial workers who deal with back pain and talk to them about how to stretch, get in better shape, so you're more resilient to those types of injuries. Mm-hmm. In that progress, and this probably would have gone back to the late 90s, during that time, I unknowingly had purchased 3 of Dr. Sarno's books that were in my professional library because I had been referred to him as a back pain doc from somebody along the way, but had never gotten around to reading them. I'd never opened them. Whenever I'd grab a book, throw it on my shelf, and I'll get to it. So when his name came up and I read a couple of articles, I'm like, why do I know this guy? And I started digging through boxes of books that I had packed away in my storage unit. And I had 3 of his books all along.
Nice.
And I was like, oh my goodness. I read 2 of them, and I don't know what order I read them. I read 2 of them like nonstop in 2 or 3 days, just back to back. For me, I was immediately 100% convinced that was what I was dealing with. I needed no further convincing. I get that's a big leap for some people. I was one of those people, and you, Dan, know better than probably anybody.
Sure.
What percentage of people might fall into that category. I had 100% acceptance of the information. Dr. Sarno's books were written in a way as a student and educator I could absorb and process and say, this makes logical scientific sense. Right. And I had full buy-in. So I would say within 30 days of reading those 2 books, my symptoms, and I'm making these numbers up, so forgive me, but I feel like I had a 30%, 25% reduction in pain symptoms and anxiety symptoms.
Well, you had an answer now, at least.
Yep.
You knew what was going on.
Yeah. So then you might say, well, okay, you got a reduction in pain symptoms. Then what happened? Because now I'm into this thing, maybe 3-4 months, this process. But here was what's unique for me. Felt like I had identified what it was. I was weary. Well, that's the word I want to use. I was aware enough to realize I should be careful who I share that information with. It's kind of like when you hear these memes or sayings where they say, when you have good information, keep it to yourself because outside energy can taint things. I didn't talk to my family about it, didn't call my doctor because I didn't want any negative pushback from anybody saying, well, who's Dr. Sarno? What's this about? So I kept it to myself. However, when it's a one-sided book and you don't have a professor or a coach or other classmates to bounce ideas off and to drill down on the learning of the information, the only thing I could do was reread the books. Right. So I spent the next few months rereading the 3 that I had multiple times, taking notes, trying to absorb and command the information. But this is what I wasn't prepared for. My symptoms then morphed. Within about 3 months, all the shoulder up pain gone as though it never happened. Woke up one morning and I'm like, did I dream this? Gone. I mean, not even, no trace. And I'm like, is this the symptom imperative he keeps talking about? It sounds too bizarre to believe. I woke up with a different set of symptoms that were equally, and I'm going to keep using the word insidious because I've broken some bones, and I had a traumatic head injury when I was in college. I got hit in the head with a brick. I played high school football at a high level. I'm only saying these things because I'm no stranger to getting beat up and pain. And this was the worst ever. I started to have horrific lower back pain. I had nerve pain that I'd never experienced in all my extremities. That seemed to be the worst at night when I was trying to sleep. The nerve pain was throughout the day, but it would amp up at night. Horrible low back pain where I'm on the floor, legs up at 90 degrees, implementing all the therapeutic exercises I had learned in my fitness career. And the nerve pain was both shooting, stabbing, snapping, pulsing, radiating my extremities, and even in my genital areas, male genitalia and anus, which, I mean, that's never good, right? And I'm like, what is happening? And then I started having what I would equate to what it must feel like to go through menopause for women. Horrible hot flashes, and I would wake up in the morning in a cold sweat, having sweat through my sheets, having to change my sheets over and over, just soaking wet. And these were the new set of symptoms that I had all at once, happening simultaneously.
Sure.
And that was my lot in life for the next couple of years. And the symptoms changed to that from what they were initially. I would say, when I said that 25 to 30% reduction in pain for a few weeks with the upper neck and head stuff after reading the books,
right,
went back up, but in these new symptoms that I just tried to outline. And those are the main ones that I can think of.
Sure.
And so now I'm back up to living at like an 8-10 level where I'm planning my exit.
Sure.
And I'm trying to reread and go over my notes, Dr. Sarno's information, and I'm trying to get into my head to relax, and I'm going for walks, and I'm revisiting my relationship with God. I identify as a Christian, certainly a big part of my life. I got real close to God because I knew that was my only hope, or at least that's what I believed in my core as a grown man. I'm like, if I don't get right with God, I believe God brings people into your life. I believe he brought Dr. Sarno into my life. I'm doing my best to deal with this. But I had to go 3 years. And the symptoms were pretty much, those were my symptoms at that time. I came across, as I continued to study TMS and do searches, that time, Mr. Ozanich.
Yeah, Steve.
Yep. His name kept popping up. And I came across another individual that seemed more hidden in the Google searches, but his name was Monty Huffley.
Oh, yeah. Running Pain.
Yeah. And I had read Steve's book, and I'm like, okay, that helped. It helped me psychologically, but no change in my symptoms.
Right.
Reached out and talked to Monty one time, and then he sent me a CD with commentary.
Sure.
And I would play that over and over when I would go for long walks and try to use some of his recommendations at that time. I knew in my heart I was on the right path, but I also knew in my heart I was talking, or I was connecting with two men outside of Dr. Sarno that said, hey, we had long journeys with this. And I had settled into the belief that if I don't die first by checking out, not necessarily from the symptoms, although I thought the symptoms were going to kill me, that my lot in life was going to be, I'm going to be a 10, 15, 20-year person if I'm lucky before I get out of this, and I may never get out.
Yeah. So as somebody who had a 13-year journey with pain,
yep,
knowing about Dr. Sarno and TMS for 12 of the 13 years, I can completely relate.
Yeah.
What I will tell you, though, is, and for anybody listening, I don't want anybody to get the impression that, well, some of these people had really long journeys, so I guess that's what's going to happen for me.
Yeah.
That's not true, because these days, not just me, but there's so many other TMS trainers, educators, doctors, physicians, legitimate clinical physicians, podcasts, YouTube, Facebook. There's a plethora of information out there that can fast start anybody who's learning about this stuff now.
I concur. And
we don't have to take 13 years to get better. And that's primarily why I'm doing this, is I've been paying attention to this stuff since the 90s, 24 years. Don't take 13 years to get better. Let me help you fast start it.
Well, and I'm 6.5 years into it, and I agree completely with you. And I would want to, for those listening, I'd want to say the same thing. And maybe I feel like I'm good at research. So 6.5 years ago, I had not found Dan. 6.5 years ago, I hadn't found Dr. Schubner. It wasn't until I was 3 years in that I found Mr. Ozanich and Mr. Huffley.
Sure.
And if I could have gotten all the way that I needed to just through the Dr. Sarno books, because as most of you know, there's very few videos of him speaking. There's some out there, but there's very few. They're not comprehensive. And so short of what I was armed with Dr. Sarno, there just wasn't the information out there. And I admittedly, at about the 3-year mark, was trying to take some hybrid of recommendations from those three guys of don't make your life about this. So I stopped doing research, which I think was probably a good thing, but I was still suffering and the pieces weren't coming together. And I'm going to get to the part where Dan helped me jettison forward, I'll call it light years. And you can always say, what would have happened had I had access? And I'm not just trying to sing Dan's praises, although they're fully warranted. But if I had had access to Dan's material in this format and this wealth of knowledge that you've amassed through the people that have come before you at that time, who knows how long I would have had to deal with this.
And that's fine. I mean, we don't have to sing praises here. I'm just trying to, capture as much of the story and give people a direction moving forward.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the whole long Sarno journey. I mean, if you look at Dr. Sarno's books, it's like 200 pages of what TMS is and a page and a half of what to do about it.
And I think that's probably the most.
Talk to your brain, think psychologically. Great. The only conclusion I came to was I still have pain, so I must not be thinking psychologically correctly, or I must not be talking to my brain the right way.
Yeah.
And it was the only conclusion I could come to. So I just kept trying to do more and more and more.
And it's hard to do without, I'm a big proponent of finding a mentor, a coach, a leader, right? And I simply didn't have that. So, after Monty Huffley's information came into my life, I felt like I turned a little bit of a corner. And I started to see a reduction in overall pain, but I was operating at a 6 to 7. And I would have, and I would have a few days off and then a couple weeks on of these flare-ups. Mm-hmm. And they were like waves. And when and they were consistent. They never stopped. And it was the first time in my life I had ever had to live with chronic pain, still dealing with the same symptoms I last outlined. But now the symptoms were beginning to morph again. Now I was having tinnitus both ears. I was having super dry, irritable eyelids. I started to have, wasn't dandruff because I asked my dermatologist, but it was almost like super dry skin to where it was almost like a dermatitis that had never had on my head before. And I'd have it for a few weeks, then it would go away for a couple of months.
Sure.
And then a couple of old injuries that I hadn't had for more than 20 years, any issues with those, I started having like phantom pain. Well, it was real pain, but I'd call it a phantom pain because I had a knee injury in college, all these years removed. It started hurting in the same way as though I had just had it and I hadn't even done anything but go for a walk. I knew I had the symptom imperatives number. I knew what it was, so I could kind of laugh at it, but it hurt like heck. And so now the symptoms are moving a lot. And when I would, at this point, share that with my family a little bit, namely my parents, what was going on, the shift of symptoms and the extreme of the symptoms, and then the newest one was the IBS, was so intense and so random that that's where I lost everybody in a potential support group, because then it almost seemed like there's some issues there, and we're glad, and hopefully he's getting counseling, but maybe he's having a midlife crisis. But my credibility, at least I felt this way as a sane, rational person, started to erode over that 6-year period.
Sure.
And I was in Austin, Texas, end of 2019. I had just moved there, and again, living at this point at about a level 6 of pain and inflammation and discomfort. And maybe my 6 is another person's 9. I don't know, but I was not doing good is my point. And that's when I came across you for the first time on YouTube. And basically for a full year, so all through 2020, end of 2019, all through 2020, I'm sure I've watched every YouTube video you have, and I just absorbed them. I didn't obsess about them. I would bookmark ones that really resonated with me. Sure. And you and I are similar age, and that was just important to me. I'm like, okay, I've got somebody that's kind of like me that I can relate to, and I finally decided Q1 of this year, hey, I'm going to book a call with Dan. We had a call. Nothing you said to me was a surprise, but it was almost like being able to talk to Dr. Sarno for the first time in my life. It just was a big boost of morale, if nothing else. All the information was great. You were generous with your time. When I hung up the call with you, you provided me with a lot of information that I could go through on my own time. And you said, don't pressure yourself with this. And I slowly worked through a lot of it. And I just kind of wanted to see, I'm a big advocate of letting this information wash over you, marinate, whatever metaphor you want to use. And let's see what happens. Well, I would say within that first week or two, I saw a drop in discomfort. And I'm like, this is great. And I was optimistic, maybe almost even cocky, that I'm like, this is going to be it. This is the last bit that I need to push me over the hump. And I bet I'll reach out to Dan in about 3 months and I'm going to be good. I just had that kind of mindset about it. About a month after we talked, I nosedived, and it was like I was as bad as I had been before finding you a year and a half before. And I'm like, what's going on? And, but the difference is I didn't panic, and I really had to step back. I believe that this whole thing operates on a macro and a micro level. The micro level's the symptoms, the pain, the maladies that are hard to get past. The macro level is, for me, the two things I have been guilty of that really fed this thing is the ruminating of information that I'm telling myself, and the catastrophizing. And I once read a book many years ago after college. It was one of my professional reading books, a book written by an author named Shad, S-H-A-D Helmstetter.
Yeah. What to say when you talk to yourself.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that's in there about, what am I saying over and over? And God knows what my subconscious is telling me.
Yeah. I mean, I say it often. We believe the things we think and say most often.
Yeah. And so I think my ruminating and catastrophizing were predicated on the two core emotions that I think for me that I've identified through everything I've learned from you, Dan, and everybody else. For me, anger and fear were the two pylons or pillars.
Sure.
That all of this is about. And the subset of that anger and fear thrust me into sadness in the most benign form, in the most benign way. But for me, because I continued with the ruminating, the catastrophizing, the sadness, I'm going to go down, went to depression.
Okay.
Went to despair. And there's a big, I always say, imagine being in the North Atlantic in the middle of the night in multi-thousand foot seas, treading water with no life jacket. That's the analogy I'll use for the despair. And then the next level, which I've walked that line, which is hard for me, particularly because I now have had two friends that have died from suicide. Obviously, one of them being my best friend, is the suicidal ideation. And knowing that not so much that I don't want to live, it's that I can't live like this any longer. And I could not get out of that loop. No, and I was like you, and I certainly was glad when you said it. Journaling's not necessary, and for you, it didn't work. I did very little journaling, but I did a lot of talking to myself out loud and in my head on my daily walks. And a lot of it was prayer format. Others, it was just kind of like this format or venting. And I verbally journaled my way out of it. I had to take I had to do an audit of myself as an adult that was, TMS revealed me. And I was not happy with what I discovered. And I went through an extended period of low self-esteem, being thin-skinned, self-loathing about things that I didn't know how far back they were going to go. I thought I did a quick inventory of the past stuff that Dr. Sarno talks about, but I revisited some things. And I think it was you, Dan, that talked about it's likely not so much about some hidden thing that happened to you when you were 5.
Sure.
It's what's going on in your life right now. And in my case, sure, there were some things in my past, but I was able to clean those up within a few weeks, especially if you're an introspective person. I know plenty of people that aren't. Right. I feel like I had an advantage. For me, it was my perception, my paradigm of my day-to-day life prior to my friend dying and after my friend dying, that was perpetuating TMS, in my case, lasting as long as it has. So that's essentially my story. Obviously you can go down a rabbit hole on the various symptoms that people have. I certainly think maybe it's an unlimited number of symptoms that can be associated with the symptom.
Anything that can happen medically, the brain can create TMS wise.
Yeah.
I literally believe that's the case.
And I intimately experienced probably 20 to 30 symptoms at a level I just didn't think possible. And there were times I thought I was possessed.
Right. So where are you at now?
So, and this is the important takeaway, like you were alluding to a little earlier about, hey, don't misunderstand where John's going in his story. It doesn't have to be this long. I had emailed you a few weeks back. I'm like, hey, because you checked in on me. And I'm like, Dan, I went up just for a little bit and then I dropped and I was going to ride it out a little bit. And I had booked another call with you and I had to wait a little bit because you were busy. And I was fine with that because I was doing my thing and I wasn't freaked out about it. And then all of a sudden, it had occurred to me, I had like 3 weeks of like, hey man, I'm like barely, my thing now at this stage is the first 15 to 30 minutes when I get up in the morning, I'm uncomfortable. And it's a variety of different things.
Sure.
And then after that 30 minutes, and by that time, I've usually had my first cup of coffee. And no, it's not the coffee.
Definitely not.
Things calm down, right? And I feel pretty good for the rest of the day. And if somebody said, well, what's your pain level at now? Maybe it's a 1. I feel like, and I'm going to use the phrase remission because I don't know what to say, but if I were to think of it as being in remission from a horrific disease, I'd say I'm 95% in remission.
Sure.
There's some vestiges and maybe there always will be, but I know what it all is. I'm no expert, but I'm an expert on me.
Sure.
I know what it is. I don't live in fear. And the stuff that I'm working on in terms of my own thought and belief and emotion, feeling life is stuff I needed to work on anyway. I wish it wouldn't have been TMS that would have led me there in some ways.
Right.
But I know you've said this, Dan, and I've read it from others in some ways. And it's hard to believe this when you feel like you need to be in the hospital, but in some ways TMS is a blessing. It was hard for me to buy into on some level that my brain is my friend and not an adversary, because it certainly felt like an adversary. Yeah.
Huge.
And there's an element for me that I thought I had to self-parent. And occasionally, if I was sitting on a bench hurting, I'd rub myself on the back of the head like I was a football coach talking to one of my athletes that was upset, or a kid saying, hey, buddy, I get it, man, but it's okay. And I'm here for you. And it sounds silly, but
no, it doesn't sound silly at all
but it helped.
Yeah. I mean, when we're dealing with this level of symptoms and pains and discomfort and fear and despair, we need somebody to tell us it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
We really do. I mean, it's tough to come to that conclusion when you're in the thick of it. When you're suffering that badly and you don't see a way out, or you've been in it for so long, you're saying, I don't know what's going to happen. How am I going to get out of this? And I think it's really important to be able to go, hey, come here, John. It's all right, bud. You're going to be okay. Yeah. And not to toot my own horn, but that's what those daily videos do.
Absolutely.
I show up every single morning and say, hey, you're going to be okay. Here's something to think about, but you can do this. You're going to be okay. Literally, I just shot a video for tomorrow morning that says, be the hero of your own movie.
Yeah.
And so, like, a lot of what I do is accurate knowledge, information, tactical strategy, what to do. But a lot of what I do is offering hope. And it's not false hope. It's accurate hope. It's like, if you can convince your brain that you're actually okay, and that being uncertain about your financial or career future, or being uncertain about your relationship status or where you're going with that, like, I'm 56. I get it. I just had a relationship end. And so, I'm sitting here going, all right, when am I going to get this right? So, I get it.
Well, I think the message of hope, and that might sound cheesy, but it's true. Look, I wrote you a personal letter that I sent to you email prior to this call a few weeks back.
Yes.
And I'm sure you get a lot of those. And I think anytime somebody reaches out to a mentor or what have you, people will pour themselves out. And I tried to do my best to express my sincere gratitude for all that you've been as a conduit of information and hope for people. And I know if there's anybody listening to this that is where I was, or God forbid, worse in their own journey, or wondering about this stuff, if like, as I said earlier, if I had access to Dan when this started, somebody to help me understand that this isn't a life sentence, this isn't, well, and that things like fibromyalgia fall into that TMS bucket. And it's unfortunate that mainstream medicine hasn't embraced this, because not only are you hurting and suffering, but then you're dealing with everything that goes with that. Maybe nobody believes you, or that there's no obvious path forward. I can get where people out there that are cynical, that might just, this is too big of a leap of faith, and I would challenge anyone to get real serious, not put pressure on yourself, but get real serious about showing up for yourself, and remembering you're the prize. And you need to know that you being happy and feeling good is what matters, and that there are strategies to make this happen. And this paradigm that is TMS, from my perspective, the good news is, and Dan talks about this all the time, is you're not broken, you're not sick, and most importantly, it's not your fault. It just happened. And
where you ended up.
Yep. And you can overcome it, you can survive it, and you will stay the course.
Yeah. So you made a statement a second ago. You said a leap of faith. And I try to clarify that, because this is not false hope. It's not a leap of faith. It's a leap of accurate information.
Absolutely.
Because, Sarno put this stuff out there 50 years ago in the 70s. And there's been so much evidence that this mind-body cause of pain and continuance of pain, right? We can learn to keep pain going, or symptoms going, just through fear and the attention we give it, the catastrophic thoughts, all of those things. And so there's brain science, there's clinical medicine behind this stuff. Sarno had, however many decades of clinical experience.
Well, and I think
so this isn't just woo-woo, think your way, pain-free. This is legitimate, how the brain works, how the system works. And when you have the accurate information, what happens to your fear? It starts to dial down. And when you're no longer afraid, you're able to kind of shift your attention back towards, let me kind of design and create a life that I want. And when your brain gets the impression that, wow, John's not focused on his symptoms as much anymore, I guess he's doing normal stuff. I guess he's okay. And the whole system can really settle down. So it's not a leap of faith. It's not blind faith. It's not just hope and a prayer. It's legitimate, real stuff. And I do everything I can to simplify it into the shortest path possible. And the core message, you said it a minute ago, you're not broken, right? You're not broken physically, mentally, emotionally. Your brain is your best friend. It's not here to punish you or torture you. It seems that way. It certainly can feel that way when you're in the midst of it. But when you realize the brain is doing everything it can to keep you safe and keep you alive, and it's operating flawlessly, but just with bad data.
Yeah.
The bad data is you can't handle your life circumstances, failure of a business, the loss of your best friend, the loss of a relationship. Who am I? Where am I? I'm a failure. How did I end up here? Right? And your brain says you can't deal with this stuff, so let's give you something else to focus on. And here's a bunch of really crazy, scary symptoms.
Yeah.
And when that was going on, you weren't thinking too much about all your life stress.
No.
Just trying to get through and figure out how do I make it through the day? And
I,
so, yeah, go ahead.
I think, and to your point on the leap of faith comment, I think for me, using that phrasing, it would be speaking to myself, to somebody like me in those first 30 days. If somebody would have said to me, hey, John, there's an MD in Portland that's a specialist in this mind body imperative condition. You need to set up an appointment. And note, I said MD, so it was like it's scientific. Or, hey, John, there's a college graduate level textbook written by a group of MDs on this topic. Even with them, so knowing that the science is there, the leap of faith, if you will, for me would have been more a leap of faith to go talk to people that can help you understand this scientific
to be open to it.
Yeah, not that getting through TMS or past TMS is a leap of faith type of thing. I just want to be more clear on that. If that makes
that's
sense.
fine. And the fact is that a lot of people hearing about TMS for the first time are like, la, 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 I'm not listening. I have a real problem. What do you mean mind body? What do you mean my brain's creating it? I got a real problem.
And that's my point, because because the first timers, that's my point. I read a lot of the comments in your daily videos. And so that's why I'm kind of speaking to those folks, because I hear people say, well, Dan, I get that this applies to these people, but for me, and I guess what I would just say if it was a live chat, I'd say, take a leap of faith and listen to Dan's information. You'll find out that there's a scientific reason for this. The leap of faith is be open to listening to Dan, or if Dr. Sarno was alive, listening to one of his lectures or reading one of Dr. Schudner's books. That's the leap of faith.
Yeah. And it's not just me. I mean, there's a lot of really good experts out there. And I think the people who are coming upon this information now are blessed compared to me coming upon it, in the late 90s. Because I'll tell you what, man, there was nothing. Facebook, YouTube, podcasts, none of it. There was Sarno's books. I think Dr. Sofer had written a book. There was a TMShelp.com, which was the old style bulletin board.
Right. Was that the wiki thing?
No, it wasn't even the wiki yet. It was before the wiki.
Oh, okay.
And so, there wasn't a lot when I was going through it. So I'd just do what you did. Keep reading Sarno and keep the daily reminders. And it was frustrating as hell, because you're like, I know what's going on. How come I'm not better?
Right.
And then you read in Sarno's book, the people who read the book and got better. And you're like, why not me? And it can be really frustrating. And what I'm suggesting is the more frustrated we get, the more in despair we get, the more we focus on it, the more we spend time trying to fix it, the farther away we're pushing it. It's like being underwater and seeing like a leaf floating underwater, and you go to try to grab it and the water kind of scooches the leaf away from you, or like a beach ball, trying to hold it underwater. Like sometimes the harder you try, the farther you're pushing it away, because the brain is interpreting this desperate need to fix yourself as you're in danger. And really what this is all about to me is consistent messages of safety. I'm okay. I'm not broken. I need to calm, soothe down. And yes, life stress will still happen. People will be like, oh, Dan, how did you deal with this, and that? And how do you get rid of all your stress? Well, you don't. Oh, so what do you do with your emotions? Do you just like push them to the side? No, you don't do that either. The key is we just need to teach the brain that those things are not dangerous. So I still lead a very stressful life full of emotions, but I don't have to hurt. And
that was the last variable. If somebody said, well, what was the last nugget that you took from Dan that kind of, or puzzle piece, if you will, I would say that was it for me. And I watched a lot of your videos where you specifically talked about that. I'm like, okay, I'm still dealing with some unique stressful things, and I'm still not where I want to be in terms of certainly having lost my friend and some other people close to me. How can I get over my TMS stuff? Well, that's still going on, and is that possible? And it was the reassurance and the repetition of your comments on that particular variable in the equation that I feel like were the final pieces for me, for whatever that's worth.
Life's not perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Stress is not dangerous unless you view it as, because there's so many, and you've seen the comments that people are saying, but I've got this going on and this going on, and how am I supposed to get better with these things still going on? You don't have to change your life to get better. You may want to reframe how you interact with your life, maybe see things a little bit more from an acceptance standpoint, right?
I was going to say embrace. I was going to ask you that because, you talked a lot about, especially when you're having a flare up, embracing or accepting your situation. And for me, it helped where you would say it might be more favorable to you to say to yourself that I'm uncomfortable today, then use other adjectives to describe what you're going through. That self-talk for me as a little, I'm going to say hack, made a big difference. I'm just like, yeah, I'm more uncomfortable today. And I would sit with it, and I would do that, coach patting me on the head saying, hey, John, but we're in this together and you're fine, buddy, and that would calm things down.
You're parenting yourself. You're basically soothing yourself as if you're a scared 4-year-old kid. And I know that sounds really weird and maybe a little hokey, but honestly, when you're in the thick of those symptoms, we are scared. We are scared. And we need somebody to go, come here, bud. I got you, man. You're going to be all right. It's temporary. These are sensations. They're awful sensations. They don't feel pleasant at all, but they're just sensations. And I try to point out a lot. I joke with people. I'm like, look, as bad as the symptoms were, all these weird symptoms in your hands and your feet, you never woke up and once found your hands and feet on the floor. We don't have things falling apart. They are just sensations. They're horrible. They're stressful. They're scary, but they're not damaging. They don't leave permanent things, like Dr. Sarna used to say. He goes, there's no permanent damage as a result of TMS. Right? We don't fall apart physically as a result of it. We can hurt as bad as you could ever imagine. And at the end of the day, you're still okay. So I like the word sensations, discomfort. Those are better than attack. I'm having an attack of pain. Well, that certainly isn't going to teach your brain that you're safe. You're being attacked.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're feeling these uncomfortable sensations, and they're temporary. It's a lot less scary than this attack. So, do you have anything else you want to add? Or
no, I appreciate.
Great. I mean, you've had a hell of a ride. What I will suggest to you is don't assume you're going to wake up with these sensations. Like you said, the first 15, 30 minutes, you're saying, it's a little bit tough until I get my day going. Well, when you wake up, instead of going, all right, just get through the first 30 minutes, start visualizing waking up, feeling great.
Yeah.
Comfortable. Start to teach your brain that that's possible. Because for right now, it's almost like there's this expectation that, well, the first 30 minutes is going to suck, but after that, I'm doing good. And given where you were, that's amazing. And you're saying, that's awesome. I can deal with that. I can live with that.
Yep.
But start visualizing what it would be like if you could wake up and feel good. Your feet hit the floor and you're okay. Right? Because that's still possible. Your brain just still believes and expects that, well, the first 30 minutes is not going to be fun, but you'll be fine and keep going, which is great, which is like a world of difference compared to where you were.
And would you call that, that's a thought habit that I've gotten into?
It's a thought habit. It's an expectation. Yeah. Dr. Schubner uses the term predictive coding. Whatever
Okay.
you expect, the brain can literally create it out of thin air. It's not because your body is needing to get moving and circulate some blood. It's not a body thing. It's the expectation that I'm going to hurt for the first 30 minutes. So why not set an expectation that you're going to feel great? Because if you can look, if you can feel great later in the day, it's not a body thing.
Right.
Your body's fine. And if you can get 95% of the way better, proof it's TMS, and it's also proof that you can get 100%. Right? Don't
Yeah.
set this limit that I'll always have this little bit. No, don't make that decision.
Yep.
Brain's listening to these decisions that you're making. And if you're deciding that I'm good with 95% and I'm okay with it this way, no, and not to say you should get mad at it or get frustrated with it, but just think of the possibilities. Wow, I got rid of 95% of these symptoms. That means I can get rid of all of it. That's the message of optimism and clarity that you want, and start visualizing that positive outcome. And so, if you do experience discomfort tomorrow morning when you wake up, okay, so what? Indifference. The less attention you give the symptoms, the more the brain realizes they're not significant. You don't have to worry about them. You're not in danger. So hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. That's a good reminder, and it's good stuff for sure.
So I'm going to invite you to keep me posted over time. Drop me an email. If you have questions, hit me up.
Okay.
That's the way I work with the coaching clients. And we only did the one call, right? In April, I think it was.
Yeah, because I ended up canceling that second call because I was
feeling good,
run, and I felt, and I did it well in a few weeks in advance.
No problem.
And you wrote me back, and you were like, "Hey, John, this is great news, and keep rolling." So it was all good stuff, and you were great about it. And so I've just been writing that, and that was about 4 weeks ago. So it's been good.
That's awesome. Well, for anybody watching, John's a prime example of going from, the deepest, darkest pits of despair to getting his life back. And it really seems like, reading through your emails, the first one, the second one, literally getting your life back and actually having a view that says, I can start planning my future and start thinking about what does John want to be when he grows up, as opposed to, will I survive tomorrow? Hell of a difference, man. And I don't know if you give yourself some credit for having the courage, the belief, the stick-to-itiveness, right? That just the commitment to yourself, because you wouldn't have gotten there if you didn't think you could do it, or if you didn't have the commitment to yourself and believing that there's a better future there for you. So kudos to you, man. I may have pointed the way, but you were the one who had to take every step.
Thanks, Dan. I really appreciate that. And, and I've already said it before, privately to you. I'm grateful for you in my life. And,
well, I'm very humbled, man. Trust me. Stories like yours are what keeps me going on wanting to shoot these videos and do the coaching and all that kind of stuff. So for anybody wondering, John hooked up with me through my website, danbuglio.com. There's a coaching link in the Get Help menu. But I also, for somebody who wants a little bit more help, because the one-on-one coaching is great, but I also now have an online course, like a video-based course with weekly group coaching sessions where people can submit questions in advance and have me answer those questions on the group Zoom call. Very similar to this, but instead of two faces on the screen, there might be 15 or 20. And as I go to answer the question that was submitted early, I'll go, okay, Susan, unmute yourself. And then I'll talk to Susan and I'll answer her question. We'll interact for 5-10 minutes and I'll go to the next one. And it literally is coaching. It's not just me reading questions and answering and everybody's silent. So that's an option as well. You can go to painfreeyou.com and look for the course/coaching menu item at the top. And that's an option as well. And we'll give you weekly support. So for anybody who really wants a little more hand holding than a one-off call, that's an option as well. John was able to benefit by the one-off call. Plus, I do send off like an email with a number of resources, which is kind of like an online course delivered in email. But I've really had to, because of my lack of availability in the one-on-one calls, I said, how can I leverage this and help out more people? And so in June, I started doing the group process and created that course. And a lot of the things that you and I spoke about on the coaching call are now encapsulated into, a 15 video course, which certainly is a lot easier than having to go to the YouTube channel and figure out which of the 800 videos you should listen to.
For sure.
So listen, man, I really appreciate you. I am humbled by your kind words. I am inspired by your results and your commitment to yourself just to get better. You probably realize it. I feel better now at 56 than I did in my early 30s. And that's what your future looks like. Just know that your body's already fine. You just got to keep reminding your brain that until it leaves you alone. And I say that, and I realize that had a negative connotation. Your brain's not attacking you or punishing you. I don't mean it in the way that you need to get your brain to leave you alone. You just need to teach your brain that you're okay. And when it believes it, it's going to have you focusing on more important things like life. So, unless you got anything else you want to add, John, I'm good to go.
I appreciate that. No, and again, thank you. And I hope that for those who are listening, if anything that I said resonates with you, having people like Dan in place to serve as a conduit of information, education, mentorship, I think is important. And, I'm always going to add a little bit, with my spiritual belief, however it is that your spiritual life works for me, prayer along with this, and just keep my mind in gratitude just made me feel better about the information I was getting. Mm-hmm. And that as long as I remained faithful and hopeful, that the light would be restored in my life. And for me, that has been completely true. So thank you.
That's awesome. John, again, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and hit the stop here.
Okay. Take care.
I appreciate you.